You ever scroll Zillow and see a Michigan house pop up and think, wait, there's no way that place costs that little. Michigan is so cheap. And then someone chimes in, yeah, until your car insurance and property tax bills show up. And both of them are right. Michigan is kind of a economic paradox. You get more space, more house, and more lifestyle for your dollar, but a few expenses can sneak up on you if you're not ready for them. And that's what I'm talking about now. Let's get to it. Last year, I broke down what it costs to actually live in Michigan, and years before, breaking down more and more cost of living videos to create more insight and perspective for you folks out there who don't have the boots on the ground. But since then, things have changed, prices, policies, even the cost of a loaf of bread. So today, I'm going deep. We're talking housing, property taxes, utilities, insurance, groceries, income levels, and the real cost of buying a home right here in Michigan. And I want you to stick around until the end because I'm going to walk you through a full example of what it costs to buy a home here, down payment, closing costs, insurance, utilities, everything. You don't want to miss it because it's going to put a lot into perspective. Oh, and before I dive in, I'm Andrew McManaman, a Michigan realtor who helps people move to, from, and within the state, and I love it. So let's jump into the nitty-gritty of it all. So let's start where everyone's wallet feels at first, and that's housing. The typical Michigan home value is sitting right around $270,000, up a few percent from last year, but still far below the national median. That's a huge reason why people from higher cost states are migrating here. Now, averages never tell the full story, obviously. You got Ann Arbor, you're looking at homes in the low 500s thanks to the university and limited supply. You got Grand Rapids, hovers around the upper 200s to low 300s, and far above that, depending on the location around the city. Detroit, still some of the most affordable city real estate in the nation, with homes selling near the low 100s, though that's changing fast as revitalization spreads. Inventory right now it's tight, roughly a 2.4 supply nationwide, so the good homes still move fast. Combine that with the mortgage rates hovering in the mid to low sixes, and buyers are being cautious but serious. Experts project steady home value growth of about 2 to 3% through 2026, which means slow, sustainable appreciation rather than spikes that we saw a few years back. But housing costs don't stop with the purchase price. You got property taxes in Michigan, and they work differently than in a lot of places. The average effective rate is between 1.15% and 1.24%, but the key word here is local. I can throw these percentages at you all day and night, but every township, city, and village sets its own millage rate, and that rate funds everything from schools and libraries to road maintenance and public services. Now, this is where people kind of get confused. There's two ways to estimate your property taxes, which comes directly from several Michigan assessors across the state. For a lower estimate, you use the current taxable value times the millage rate divided by 1,000, which is a figure you have access to on a home listing platform, especially if you're using a realtor or BSA online to see some of the tax history. A higher estimate, which I tell people to plan for the worst and hope for the best, is using half the purchase price, times it by the millage rate, divided by 1,000 to get a higher, more realistic estimate. For example, if you buy a $270,000 home in a township with a 38 millage rate, that's roughly $135,000, which is half of that 270, like I mentioned. You times that millage rate of 38, divide it by 1,000, you got around $5,130 a year in property taxes. And yes, local ballot proposals can adjust that millage rate, so voting locally literally affects your wallet, and that's something that I always encourage people to take part of. Michigan also has a principal residence exemption, PRE form, which means if the home is your primary residence, you are exempt from up to 18 mils of school operating tax. So be sure to check your tax bills and make sure it states 100% and not anything less to ensure it's your primary residence on paper. Proposal A, which I've talked about a lot in the past, that was enacted in 1994, it states that property's taxable value can only increase each year by the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is lower, as long as you own the property. And what happens during a home transfer is what's known as uncapping. A transfer of ownership will cause the taxable value of the transferred property to uncap in the calendar year following the year of the transfer of ownership. And that's why if you're a homeowner in Michigan, you notice a big jump in taxes following that first year of homeownership. That's exactly why. And one of the biggest complaints about property taxes is wait, why are my taxes more than my neighbors? I don't get it. We have a similar house, yada yada. Well, with this uncapping in mind, if there was no change of ownership in 10, 20, 30, 40 years with your neighbor, the tax is never uncapped like yours did when you bought it last year. Most people don't understand that the property tax rates you see on Zillow under a home listing are not what you're paying, it's what the seller is paying. And what's even more concerning is lenders, not all, but a lot of them, will base your pre-approval letters on those current taxes instead of what they will be a year after homeownership. So it becomes a big old slap in the face, and that's why it's crucial to use tools like the Michigan Property Tax Estimator during your home search to ensure the projected taxes don't kill your budget, and I will link that in the description for you. Now, insurance, the category that always gets groans in Michigan. Let's start with auto. For decades, Michigan ranked at the top for insurance costs because of its no-fault system, but reforms mean drivers can now choose their level of personal injury protection coverage, which is PIP protection. You have unlimited, you have 500, you have 250K, or even opt out entirely if you're on Medicare, but you have to sign accepting the risk of the lower coverage. And that change created real savings for many drivers, but it depends on where you live and what coverage you choose to. There's always that situational circumstance there. Full coverage policies now range from roughly $1,800 to $3,000 per year on average, though I've seen plenty lower. And for me, for example, I have just a regular SUV, and that's about, it was around $1,500 a year for that for me, just with one vehicle. Just make sure you understand what you're giving up before you start slashing coverage, and that's the most important thing. I was told by one insurance agent that I couldn't lower X, stating it was a Michigan law, but I went around them and did my own policy just to find out that's what put more money in their pockets. So with anything, I encourage you to do your own due diligence. I myself have gone through every single line item for auto insurance to fully understand what it is, what it covers, and how much of it I actually need coverage for. And then homeowners insurance, on the other hand, averages about $1,900 per year across the state. Closer to the lakes, it's often higher, while inland and suburban areas, they'll see lower rates. But you bundle your home and auto policies, and you can usually save 10 to 15%, and then you tack on the safe driver, you tack on the student, whatever your circumstances. Be sure to try and dig up other discounts that you can see there, because there's actually a lot of them that they dish out. And if you've replaced your roof or updated your electrical and plumbing recently, let your agent know, or if you don't have an agent, you're doing it yourself, make sure you note that. Many carriers will lower your premium for that. Now let's talk utilities, because this is where Michigan's Four Seasons can really hit your budget. Electric rates hover around 20 cents per kilowatt hour, natural gas around $1.20 per therm. The average monthly utility bill, including electricity, heating, water, and trash, lands between $150 to $250 for most households. Definitely can be more than that, though the winter months can really double that when the furnace is working overtime. If you live rural, you might rely on propane. That's usually $3 to $4 per gallon, and a full tank can cost several $100s, depending on your home size, the size of the tank, and of course your home and the winter temperatures. But on the city water and sewer aspect, you'll likely pay $60 to $120 a month, depending on usage and location too. If you're on well and septic, your monthly bills will be lower, but you'll trade that for maintenance costs. Septic pumping runs $300 to $600 every 2 or 3 years. Water softener salt runs about $25 a month, and you'll want to replace those filters annually, depending on how harsh your water is, and that can be another $100 or so. It just really depends on the filter you get. And then you add in furnace tune-up every fall. You have $100 to $150 on that. And snow removal, if that's nothing that you want to do, that's $400 to $700 a season. Then you have transportation. Michigan's gas prices are hovering near $3.05 to $3.50 a gallon as of recording this, usually just below the national average. The average commute time across the state is around 25 minutes. And no, we don't have toll roads, which is one of those underrated cost savings too. If you're in the Detroit metro area, the public transit network isn't New York or Chicago, but it works if you plan it right. You got the DART pass, combines DDOT and smart buses for $5 per day or $70 a month, and both the Q line and People Mover downtown are still free in 2025. Grocery and daily living are where Michigan actually shines. Our cost of living index sits around 97 compared to the national average of 100, meaning we're slightly cheaper overall. A gallon of milk costs $3.30, a loaf of bread is about $3, and a dozen eggs roughly $2.50. Shopping at Meijer, Kroger, or Aldi will stretch your dollar farthest. Whole Foods, well, you might leave with fewer groceries and a slightly bruised ego. A family of four can eat comfortably on $850 to $1,000 a month if they cook at home, especially when you factor in our farmers markets in the summer and the fall too. Dining out averages $15 to $20 per person at casual restaurants and $50 to $60 at high-end restaurant spots. Think Ann Arbor, Birmingham, or Traverse City area. I want to switch gears though to healthcare in Michigan, and it's middle of the road compared to the national average. A standard doctor visit without insurance runs about $120 to $140. Employer-sponsored plans cover most costs, but workers still pay around $6,800 annually toward family plans. Michigan's hospital systems like U of M, Corewell, Trinity consistently rank among the best in the Midwest, which makes it easier to balance cost with quality care. Another thing that I wanted to touch on is the income, because the cost of living conversation doesn't mean much without it. The median household income in Michigan is about $72,000. For a single person, it's roughly $42,000 to $45,000, while dual income families average between $85,000 and $90,000. Depending on the region and industry, of course. You got manufacturing, healthcare, education, technology. They remain the state's job anchors, and remote work has made it possible for a lot of residents to keep out-of-state salaries while living here at the same time. And that's part of what's keeping our housing market so steady too. And then there's the climate factor to kind of rope into the utility costs. Michigan's four seasons, like I mentioned, mean your utilities swing up and down. Heating bills rise in the winter, but summers are mild enough that many households save on cooling entirely. Smart thermostats, good insulation, and energy audits can cut utility bills by 10 to 15% a year. Now, just with that brief breakdown of all the different costs associated with living in Michigan, I want to do a full breakdown of what the cost would be to purchase an average price home in Michigan while giving you some insight into the home buying process along the way. And I want to disclose that this is just one example, and all the fees are subject to change based on location, title company, brokerage, situation, etc. But I think this creates some perspective that's very much needed. Throwing out the $270K price tag, let's say you put an offer in and it gets accepted for that price. And once it gets accepted, you need to put forth what's called an earnest money deposit, which is a good faith deposit letting the seller know you're serious about purchasing the home. And that's typically 1 to 3% of the purchase price. And more times than not, you can get away with that 1%. So in this situation, $2,700, which would also be a credit towards your overall closing costs, but you do have the risk of losing this if you were to back out of the transaction outside of the standard contingency, which are things like home inspection, inability to get financing, appraisal disagreements, etc. So that in plain English is if you just decided you wanted to back out for no reason at all, just got cold feet, then you have the potential to lose it. And the caveat to that, of course, is you can back out during the inspection period for any reason, of course. And speaking of inspection, that would be the next cost, which would be $400 to $1,000, depending on everything you get done. You could have a well and water test, a sewer scope, a septic inspection, radon gas monitoring, mold test, pest test, etc., etc. But in this example, I will say $750, which is paid at the time of inspection. But there are some companies that will delay payment until closing. And while on this topic, although getting a $400 inspection looks enticing, getting all the bells and whistles to your inspection for peace of mind is heavily encouraged. I work with very great and thorough inspectors, and I have worked with some who simply take a million pictures of everything and fluff the report up, but provide no actual context to what we're looking at. So you truly get what you pay for, and that one-time cost can really save you thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. Following that home inspection, once satisfied, is the appraisal, which comes out to be $300 to $500. So I will say $450 based on averages. From the deposit to inspection and appraisal, we're at $3,900 right now. So assuming all that is situated and moving forward accordingly, I'll jump into some closing costs. Since The average down payment, if you can believe, is actually 8%. That comes out to $21,600. But if you are a first-time home buyer getting 3 and 3.5% down, that down payment would be $8,100 to $9,450. But for the sake of this example, I'm going to say this house is in Rochester Hills, Michigan, in Oakland County, and assuming, let's just say, we're going to close on this home in November 27th on the house. So going right down the closing cost sheet from a title company, the first expense is the Alta loan policy, which is the type of title insurance that protects a lender's interest in a property against losses from title defects, and that comes out to $1,062. The premium is calculated using a rate schedule provided by the title insurer, which often uses the liability amount as the basis for determining the cost, which is super confusing, I know. But then we have a recording fee or a conveyance fee from the title company for $30, a conveyance deed certification fee for $5, a mortgage deed of trust recording fee of $30, an e-recording fee estimate of $6.80, a technology fee of $50, a recording processing fee of $50, a settlement fee, which is the fee to the closing company, or the title company I should say, for $695. And then you have the transaction fee or compliance fee, which is a charge from a brokerage to cover the cost of ensuring a transaction adheres to state and national regulations, which including processing the paperwork and maintaining records, of around $425 depending on the brokerage. And then you have the property taxes, which are very confusing, which in this case we're going to say they're prorated. In some areas they are paid in arrears, which means after the service period, where advance means paid ahead of time. So keep that in mind, but it also depends on what your purchase agreement states too. So let's just say in this case, this time of year, the seller would have paid for summer taxes in this example, and they are $2,491, and they paid for the winter taxes, which are $2,333.39. The buyer will reimburse the seller for the summer taxes during the time the seller isn't living there anymore, since they are paid in advance based on a 365-day calendar year. So you'd owe them $1,474.13, which covers the dates 11/27/2025, which is the closing day, through 6/30/2026. And then you will also reimburse the seller $25.57 for the winter taxes covering 11/27/25, which is the closing date, through 11/30/2025, so 3 days. Keep in mind, lenders create an escrow account to pay principal, interest, taxes, insurance based on the next due dates, so you don't have to keep track of all this because it is insanely confusing. But people sometimes complain about escrow accounts because there will be surpluses and shortages where, depending on the surplus, they may send you a check, and a shortage, they may request additional funds. So it's definitely not perfect. But if you're someone who doesn't want to keep track of all this stuff like due dates and deadlines, then it works. But to get rid of an escrow account, it really depends on your lender, the down payment, who you refinance with if you choose to do so, etc. Then you jump down to the mortgage lending fees, which average 3% and come out to $7,542, which is, of course, and always subject to change based on discount points, lender credits, your program, who you went through for the loan, etc., etc. Homeowners insurance for this location and this size home would be $700 to $900 a year. So I'll put $775 for the year. Sometimes you'll have to bring a 12-month paid receipt to closing. Other times you may be able to pay it at closing, which brings this whopping total to $30,205.50 for a $270,000 home in Rochester Hills, Michigan. And at a rate, let's just say an interest rate of 6.5% for the sake of this, and homeowners insurance at the cost of that $775, like I said, your monthly payment is right around $2,036.50, which doesn't account for electricity, gas, groceries, Wi-Fi, etc. And since Rochester Hills trash is baked into the taxes, that would be another proration or adjustment of about $50 in these closing costs. So on a monthly basis, your overall cost for all those things mentioned and outlined can be $2,500 plus a month. And again, full disclaimer, this is a hypothetical example based on real tax rates and title company fees. And I want to ask you, based on that breakdown, what your thoughts are about the cost to purchase this $270K home. Drop them in the comments below. And I will be the first to say this breakdown is absolutely outrageous, considering this is a starter home by today's standards, and having to bring 30K plus to closing while investing in your retirement, your life, and having an emergency fund for when your roof or furnace decide to fall apart. Considering most homes at this price are not fully move-in ready, can be overwhelming, challenging, and is truly insane based on the average incomes I talked about earlier. So when your parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles tell you you are lazy and not working hard enough, send them the portion of this video and see what they think about paying $2K for a mortgage payment on their very first home every single month. The median age to buy a home is 38 years old. There's a reason so many people around that age are living with their parents or simply can't get pre-approved because their debt to income ratios won't allow for it. And it doesn't help that you go to college for 4 years, get 6 figures in debt right away, and come out with a starting income of 50 to 60K. And despite your years and your experience that is tacked on with all that, your income hardly trickles up. And I throw this out there because it's real. I help buyers and sellers every day, and the hardships they face just to come up with closing costs is sad, and it really should not be like that. But I want to look ahead. Economists expect Michigan's home values to rise modestly, about 2 to 3% a year, with inflation cooling near 2.8%. Energy prices are stabilizing and job growth is steady, and that means 2025 is shaping up as one of those sweet spot years, stable enough to buy, affordable enough to plan long term, and early enough that prices haven't quite caught up to the full value as of yet, which is crazy to say by today's standards. The bottom line, Michigan's cost of living sits about 6 to 8% below the national average, and your dollar buys not just a home, but it's a way of life. Like I say in every single video that I put out there, you get more room, you get more nature, you get more weekend freedom without needing a Silicon Valley paycheck. But as the years go on, that affordability, as I mentioned, is dwindling to say the least, and you can conclude that from the example I shared. So what surprised you most about Michigan's cost of living? The property tax math, the insurance, how far your grocery budget can actually stretch? Drop your thoughts and your answers below. I'd love to hear them. If you're thinking about moving to Michigan in one day or $1 billion, I help people do just that, and I love to help people do it. My contact info is in the description, and I also link the Living in Michigan newsletter, which includes updates, guides, and things I don't usually share here on my videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time.